Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week, is rescheduling of cannabis dead? The new administration's interim pick to lead the DEA, Derek Maltz, is an outspoken prohibitionist of cannabis, and many reports say the positive movement over the past few years is a non-starter now. And Trump's pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, gets grilled on Capitol Hill over her stance on federal reform and dances around the questions of rescheduling and/or legalization. And a new poll concludes that 96% of regular cannabis users believe the DEA is biased on rescheduling of that plant medicine. In Virginia, NORML holds its two-day cannabis conference, headlined by our friend Morgan Fox as its keynote speaker.
We're starting to see a little bit of movement. We're starting to see more supportive statements from politicians. We're starting to see a lot more media coverage.
Plus, Indiana lawmakers start to haggle about how an adult use program would work in that Hoosier state, and they're just starting that process of reform in Indiana. Meanwhile, in another state that has already approved adult use, Minnesota, they can't get started at all while the illicit market thrives. And what will Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation mean to that country's legal cannabis market? All that and Coast to Coast reports on cannabis news on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly production of cannabis news from California to Massachusetts. I'm Alaina Pinto. The best way to follow our weekly coverage of the fight to end cannabis prohibition is to download the PCMTV app from Google Play or the App Store. You'll also, with this, get access to the past 4 years of shows documenting the road to reform. It's free, and you can sign up right now by scanning the QR code on the screen. Just in case you haven't heard, there's a new president in the White House, and his name is Donald Trump. The Republicans will dictate any movement in Congress over the next few years on federal reform. And this week, the new president's picks for Attorney General Pam Bondi and the interim director of the DEA, Derek Maltz, are not supporters of any changes to the existing laws, and neither seems too keen on making any changes a priority at the federal level. What the feds can't do is ignore the fact that 24 states have adult use programs, 40 have decriminalized it, and have medical programs, and 70% of the populace wants legalization. This week, Virginia correspondent Joe Parsons talked with Morgan Fox, the political director of NORML, about the challenge for change ahead.
Where do we go from here? And, we're seeing that there's, considerably more pushback in some of the states that have yet to legalize cannabis or have yet to regulate sales. In Virginia, there's definitely a lot of opposition to actually regulating sales, despite the fact that the people and majority of lawmakers supported making cannabis legal for adults. And so that's definitely something that our folks are going to be working on when they're doing lobbying, but something that is going to be a top-line conversation when we're talking with advocates at the actual conference.
Morgan was the keynote speaker at Virginia NORML's annual Lobby Days conference, and later on, we will have his report from that event. For the rest of what's going on in Washington, D.C., here's Andrew Behringer.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Drug Enforcement Administration has a new acting administrator, Derek S. Maltz, sparking controversy within cannabis circles. With over 28 years of DEA experience before retiring in 2014, Maltz steps into a leadership role that's immediately drawn criticism. He's replacing former Administrator Ann Milgram and bringing a decidedly tough stance on drug policy. Maltz has been vocal about his opposition to current cannabis legislation, arguing that the Biden administration is placing politics above public safety. His appointment comes at a critical moment with the ongoing debates about cannabis rescheduling and current regulation creation. Some people have described Maltz as a drug war hawk, suggesting his views are significantly out of step with the mainstream public opinion on cannabis policy. Most notably controversial are Maltz's claims linking high THC levels to increased school shooting incidences, a statement that's already raising eyebrows among policy experts like myself. The DEA has currently paused in-person hearings on cannabis rescheduling pending an administrative appeal, a move that underscores the complex legal landscape Maltz is currently going to inherit. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. See you next week.
There's an interesting story out of Connecticut this week that every grower should know about. Back in 2020, TheraPlant in Watertown, Connecticut, had a fire that destroyed parts of its grow facility and just under 1,000 plants in that grow room. This week, a federal judge ruled that the insurance policy did not cover the plants destroyed in the fire and the subsequent income from the sale of those plants. It just covered the physical structure of TheraPlant's grow house. So for any growers out there, make sure you ask your insurance agent about crop insurance, not just building insurance. And this is happening right now in California, where they are still recovering from the devastation from the wildfires in the greater LA area. And now a dispensary in California called Embark has started a GoFundMe campaign to help out cannabis-specific businesses. While millions of dollars are being donated by major corporations, sports leagues, and philanthropists, this fund will go directly to cannabis operators. You can donate at their GoFundMe.com page for the United Cannabis Community Fire Relief Fund. They have a goal of just $90,000, and they are 85% of the way to meeting that goal. Any donation is appreciated and tax deductible. For more from California, here's Dina Nagib.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A new marijuana trade group in California representing the state's largest retailers has been formed to address the looming potential excise tax hike and to create new legislation replacing Proposition 64, which many in the industry describe as flawed. The California Cannabis Operators Association launched with 17 members, including the Catalyst Cannabis Co., Embark, and Stizzy, which operate about 75 dispensaries combined. The California market is on the verge of imploding, and it's encouraging to see license holders come together, but time will tell if change can be made. On the research front, the University of California in San Diego released results from a study on cannabis smoke exposure to children in their homes. Measurements were made on air particles in the home, and THC and its metabolites were measured in children's urine, demonstrating increased levels when the parent or guardian reported smoking cannabis. There are limitations in this study, and it stated that many were also tobacco smokers, increasing the amount of overall smoking. The results finding indications of THC in urine from secondhand smoke are notable, and further studies are necessary. That's it for the California news. This is Dina Nagib with Grass Goddess Consulting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The nation has been stuck on 24 adult use states for over a year now, with Ohio being the last one to open up legal sales for adults. Minnesota actually ratified their laws to open adult use market before Ohio, but like so many early stage states, writing the regulations and setting up the rules has been delayed time and time again. Now the illicit market is reaping the benefits in that state, and over $600,000 worth of cannabis has been seized by law enforcement in 2024 for jumping the gun. Despite a fledgling restrictive medical program that started in 2015, Minnesota didn't want to follow the model of Ohio and Arizona by immediately giving licenses to the existing medical dispensaries to sell to adults. And now they are standing still. No such issues in Nevada or with the tribal nations who are open for business and reaping the tax benefits. Here's Tina Tasaka with the Nevada and Tribal Lands Cannabis Report.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Many states offer the cannabis industry an FA card, facilities agent, Colorado, Arizona, Oregon, Nevada, and others. Most charge a fee around $150 for a 2-year term. Well, in Nevada, the FA card is a little different. There are 8 categories with the card, and many cannabis employees are required to have multiple cards. This becomes very expensive if you need 4 or 5 cards just to do your job. Here comes the Chamber of Cannabis and upcoming 2025 legislative focus. They are working on getting this modified, specifically to consolidate agent card categories. In the long run, this will reduce significant expenses for the employee, encourage cross-training, and retain talent. See more related legislation and what the Chamber of Cannabis can bring to you or your company in Nevada. www.cofclv.org. 12 tribes advance equity in the cannabis industry. The ICIA continues to champion opportunities for the indigenous people in the cannabis industry, paving the way for meaningful change in 2025 and beyond. In 2024, the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association welcomed 12 tribal government members, strengthening their mission to expand access to plant medicine and empower indigenous communities. The ICIA made strides globally, speaking at the International Cannabis Business Conference in Berlin and the Andean Hemp and Cannabis Trade Forum in Peru. ICIA's 3rd annual National Indigenous Cannabis Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. emphasized tribal sovereignty in cannabis and hemp industries, while regional efforts included Wisconsin's 2nd annual Cannabis Summit and launching the Wisconsin Tribal Task Force on Cannabis, and another is coming up at the end of February. Advocacy also extended to federal policy, with ICIA amplifying Indigenous voices in the DEA's cannabis rescheduling discussions. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The state legislature of Indiana is starting to move towards a bill that would open up an adult use market in that state. They have the support of their governor for a medical program, but the Republican-controlled state legislature has always blocked any movement. That might be changing. The lobbyist group Safe and Regulated Indiana formed last year and is working with a Republican representative, Heath Van Natter from Kokomo. The congressman is introducing a bill that would fully legalize the adult use of cannabis and establish a regulatory framework for sale in that very conservative state. Van Natter said his bill will address the reality of its presence in our society with a responsible conservative solution. Indiana is surrounded by states that have some kind of legal cannabis market operational, including Illinois, where they continue to deal with the difficult question of driving under the influence of cannabis and determining how impaired that driver is. Mark Allen, the Cologne guy, is our new Illinois correspondent, and he's fired up over some of the controversies emerging over this challenging question.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, and this is Bird. We're reporting from Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. University of Illinois Chicago made the news this week, or actually recently, but not for good reasons. They've actually been helping the state prosecute cannabis DUIs. How they've been doing this, though? But they've been doing it with flawed test results. They were recently audited, and that auditing agency declared that literally they had flawed blood testing or nonconformities. So bad, so they literally said that they had a failure to follow scientific standards. Do better, University of Illinois Chicago, because now there's 1,600 people that are in jail or have been convicted of a cannabis DUI because of your flawed testing blood results. Not only is that bad, it's so bad that March of last year, they knew about it, and then they waited 2 months to even tell the state. So then further examination into it found out that not only did they know about it then, they knew about it back in 2021. And nothing's happened about it. So that's been paused and discontinued while all these people sit in jail and can't get jobs and can't move on with their lives. University of Illinois Chicago is doing this, and nobody's done anything about it. There's no accountability for anybody in the state or those testing organizations. Unfortunately, we got to keep moving forward. That's how it is. On other news, that's, I guess, not so good. There's been a lot of cannabis grow shops in Chicagoland last year or so that have been closing down. I'm going to blame it straightly on, specifically on the economy and what's been going on the last 4 years. Numerous shops have closed down. The ones that are still open have to move or have actually had to move to smaller, locations that are lower in rent so they can afford to stay in business. Those shops that are staying in business here attribute their sales to seeds, clones, and soil. They say that everything else can pretty much be bought on the internet, and that's what people are doing. So that sums up the Illinois Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen, checking out. Thanks for tuning in.
That will wrap up the A block for this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. But when we come back, we will go down to Virginia and check in with Joe Parsons again, who covered the Normal Cannabis Conference down there this weekend.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.